But before we dive into the discussion, I am going to mention sponsors stroke partners. And of course, we have our old friend, that is Panessa Training Institute, where you train yourself to understand good work and those things that we love in the house. Then we have K Squared. K Squared is in Rwanda. If you want to do HR work in Rwanda, you have no option but to talk to K2 Careers. Then we have Tuva Resort is in Nyanyuki. It is absolutely stunning. I have been there a couple of times. It is absolutely stunning. If you want to use your money well, as Nigerians, if you want, how do they say it? If you want to chop your money, it is Tuva that you need to go to. Then we have our good friend, his organization, that is Steadfast Solutions, that is led by our good friend Herbert Zake. Herbert Zake, you can salute us. He's a specialist in discovering your strengths, what makes you strong. And remember, in organizations, we are paid because of the strengths we have. So if you want your strength to be discovered, Herbert Zake in Uganda is your person to talk to. He leads an organization called Steadfast Solutions. And then we have Lymph Prolific Care Kenya Limited. I am sure you understand what that means. That is about wellness. If you want to get some attention, those are the people to talk to. And without further ado, I will introduce myself. My name is Richard Magoma. Richard Magoma is a HR professional. I train people to speak very well. I also prepare people for interviews. But today, we are not going to talk about interviews or how to speak eloquently like Steve Kauma. And you're going to bear me witness. We are going to welcome Steve to talk to us on what we need to do as HR professionals when we need to lead change before it leads the business. Before you lead the business, what are you going to do? That is when the HR is at the top dog. Steve, how are you doing?
Very well, very well. How are you doing, Richie?
Very well.
Thanks for the intro.
And yourself?
Yes.
You can introduce yourself. Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Oh, you want me to introduce myself?
Yes, so that you brand yourself where you are. I could have given several dollars for people to guess where you are, but I'm sure they are not. Karibu sana.
Asante sana. So my name is Tio. That's everybody calls me Tio. I'm Ugandan by birth and nationality, but I'm an African by conviction. And I've been practicing HR for the last 25 years, I would say, 25 plus. I started out in financial advisory. I worked for KPMG, I worked for PwC, and then I branched into HR industry, so to speak, with Lafarge Holcim before I joined African Export-Import Bank, where I currently am a Group MD for HR for Africa and the Caribbean. We cover 66 countries in our operations, and I'm based in Cairo. It's a pleasure to be able to, discuss with you this interesting topic today. Yeah. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, please proceed.
Oh, you already handed the floor over. I thought you were saying I should introduce myself and then. Okay.
No.
All right.
As we say in debating, we say the floor is yours.
Okay, so allow me to share, first of all. Yeah. Okay, I hope that you can see the slides.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So Grace reached out to me. This is the second time I'm making a presentation to this group. And well, Herbert is the one that reached out to me, but it's the second time I'm making a presentation to this group. And it truly is, besides being an honor, a pleasure for me to be able to share my ideas and thoughts on this area. Now, you may notice that I did not exactly follow the rules about the presentation, but what I thought I decided to do was focus on the fact that when we talk about change today, change, especially in relation to the workforce and what HR is essentially meant to do to deal with that, I think the most topical issue is essentially digitalization. One of the most transformative changes that is going on in our world today is that of digitalization and AI enablement. And therefore, I felt that that would be my focus so that we can have a discussion on what we think it looks like, how should we deal with it, and also to present a model that I have developed, which I think would be useful for practitioners in dealing with this change. So, as you can see, the title of it is, give me 1 second, is a digital-enabled workforce, and essentially highlighting the choice that we have between growth and failure for businesses in emerging markets. So let's just, first of all, look at the characteristics of what we mean by emerging markets today. Richie, if I could ask you to sort of give me a warning after every 10 minutes, because I understand I have 30 minutes to present, right?
Yes, I will. I will.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So the typical emerging markets workforce today is one that is increasingly growing in terms of technical skills. Africa today and other emerging markets have generally got more educated people or a more educated labor force than we had 25 years ago, 30 years ago. That's a fact that's well researched and well proven. Also, it is typical that most of the workforce in emerging markets today tends to be office-based. Now, office-based comes in different forms and the different types of offices, I would say. But what I mean by this is that versus remote work, where people sit, in a place of their choice and then work, most of the workforce that we have in Africa and other emerging markets generally tends to be required to converge in one space in order to do whatever it is that they do. It could very well be that they have to go to the market and sit and sell their wares or whatever the case may be. The other typical characteristic is that it's generally a workforce that is focused on routine work. The orientation generally tends to be routine, in many cases, repetitive work. What this means is that the highest or the largest group of the workforce is generally focused on low to medium level technical work, rather than very highly specialized industry type of work. And then, of course, the fourth being, give me a second. The fourth being that it is, in many cases, semi-formal, right? So let's also look at the environment. I thought it would be important to bring out the trade environment in which we operate, because, we live in a workforce where we live in an area in a time when more and more the workforce is involved in trade of some kind, whether it is intra-African trade, whether it is trade across borders to other parts of the world. There's a link that you can make to it. And this obviously has been a result of the fact that globalization of trade over the last 30 years, with the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1994. This was preceded by the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade Agreement, which was 1947. What that means, of course, is that in general, there's a lot more trade going on between different parts of the world today than was the case 50 or 70 years ago. However, this has been affected lately by the fact that there's increasing levels of nationalism, especially led by countries like USA and China, who feel that they need to protect their industries more than they were doing. And it's quite surprising, but countries like the USA actually protect their economies a lot more than countries in emerging markets. For example, Chinese vehicles are banned from the American market. And there are many other cases of that which we generally know. But there are also shocks that continue to affect businesses negatively. We know what COVID-19 did to businesses. Many businesses did not survive, they closed. Others, however, building on the advantages of digitalization, managed to survive and have thrived. Of course, military conflicts in major economies, Ukraine and Russia, Iran, Israel and USA, Venezuela, the Sahel region of Africa, the South African xenophobic attacks that have been going on, the DRC mineral-fueled conflicts, all of these are the sort of things that are going on within our trade and business environment. We can't ignore them. We need to take into account the fact that if you have people that are trading between Uganda and DRC, if there's Ebola in the DRC, it's going to affect their business. And so it's important for us to bear those things in mind as we go along. The business environment is also shifting rapidly. Some of this is related to the fact that, yes, we have an increasing number of literate people in the workforce, as I've said. We have increasing levels of, this should be immortality, not mortality. We have increasing levels of people who spend a longer time living than was the case before. Because again, if you look at many parts of Africa, there are improvements in health infrastructure than was the case 25, 30 or 40 years ago. It's not the best, and there are many improvements that could still be made, but I think we need to recognize those. There are also high levels of economic migration, especially within emerging markets. There's a tendency for us to focus on migration between emerging markets and more developed economies. But if you look at the migration patterns, actually, the highest levels of migration or immigration is actually within emerging markets. If you look at the levels of immigration between African countries, they are huge. Some of that is caused, of course, by displacement, but others, another part of it is caused by, economic choice. And then, of course, which is one of the main areas that we're going to explore in this discussion today, is the fact that there's huge technological advancements. The fourth industrial revolution started 20 or so years ago. And now we have seen artificial intelligence, cloud computing, Internet of Things, edge computing. All of these are transforming the way that businesses need to think about remaining competitive. And of course, we need to highlight that we are on the cusp of the fifth industrial revolution. And, when we get to that point, we'll be able to have, biosynching and all the other things that come when you have a full immersion of or a full symbiotic relationship between human capacity and AI. So as we say all of that, let's remember that artificial intelligence is a game changer in all of that. As we're dealing with the whirlwinds of the trade environment, the whirlwinds of the business environment, the changes and disruptions that are happening within our environment, we need to remember that artificial intelligence is a game changer. Now, this presentation is by no means one that is focused on artificial intelligence. One, I'm not an artificial intelligence expert of any kind or any sort, but I think it would be important for me to just sort of give some sort of background to what artificial intelligence is all about. And there's a definition there by those two people. They are from IBM, but essentially saying that AI enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision-making, creativity, and autonomy. AI tools are built on two types of technologies, machine learning and deep learning. Machine learning is the older type of AI enablement, which involves creating models by training an algorithm to make predictions. So essentially what could otherwise be known as predictive AI. So they rely on historical data and use certain types of models or to do what they do. But more and more today, we have seen what is known as deep learning. Now, deep learning uses multi-layered neural networks, otherwise called deep neural networks, that more closely simulate the complex decision-making part of the human brain. This is also known as generative AI, and some of the tools that you come across which can fit that category is ChatGPT and many others that some of you may have come across. You could even go a level higher from predictive AI and generative AI into agentic AI, which is a deeper level, a higher level of autonomous being, but we'll not get into that. I thought it was important for us to understand how the AI ecosystem generally works, because if as a business, if as HR leaders we're looking at adopting and making sure that we can improve the manner in which we deploy digital technology into our operations, into how our people work, we need to understand what that ecosystem looks like. And I hope that with this presentation, you will be teased enough, for those of you that haven't done that yet, to go back and learn more about how this works, speak to specialists that are in this area, and be able to wrap your heads around how this ecosystem generally operates, because we need to do that in order to make ourselves relevant for the businesses of the future. So the comprehensive ecosystem, this was done by a guy called Kwafano. First of all, it recognizes the fact that the ecosystem has got what you call core hardware. Some of you may have heard how companies in China and the USA, some parts of Asia, are rushing to build factories that build chips. These chips are used in systems, computers that are required for AI to operate. They need specialized processors, they need memory systems, and the tools that are used to create the interconnections. So any AI system would require core hardware. Then you have cloud infrastructure. Today, it's typical that most people use cloud infrastructure to store their data. 10, 15, 20 years ago, every company would want to build their own server room to store their data. Most people don't do that anymore. So that is also part of the ecosystem. There are service providers that focus on cloud infrastructure for all those inference services, for supercomputing, and for resource management. The third pillar in there is AI models. Now, these are the models which enable AI to run. You have what we call foundation models, large language models, such as Claude. Some of you may have heard of that. And there are many others. There's a Chinese one called Kimi K3, which just came out very recently, and it has been buzzing across the markets. Then you have specialized models. Now, these are models that are domain-based. The foundation models tend to be open in the sense that they're open software, anybody can use them, anybody can update them, while domain models tend to be those which are closed, ostensibly for security purposes. Then you have vertical AI applications. So these are apps that help to ensure that the technology that we're using for AI runs. You also have consumer applications, mobile apps, web interfaces, and all the things that come with that. And then you have AI-specific consumer devices. To use AI today, most people, many of you, almost all of you, I'm sure, use some type of AI-enabled technology on your phones, on your iPads, on your laptops. When you use Face ID on your phone, that's AI that's working right there. So those are some of the things that we need to look at from an ecosystem perspective to understand how they link into each other. Because when we understand how they link into each other, then we can make conscious decisions of how we can improve and take advantage of the human AI interaction process. So how will businesses thrive in this environment where things are changing rapidly, where you have lots of infrastructure developments that are going on to support AI enablement, lots of device manufacturing that's going on, lots of code being built in support of that process? The first thing that it requires from us as HR leaders, as business leaders, is awareness, which is why I brought up those slides on what the ecosystem looks like. How much do you know about this ecosystem? If you're not aware, one, you will be unable to understand what problem you're trying to solve. And two, when you're speaking with the specialists that you need to get the problems or solutions that to these issues, you will not be able to understand half of what they're telling you because you haven't built a foundation of knowledge around that. So awareness is very important. The second is agility. Once you've built awareness, how do you then ensure that you can do those things that are required to be done? Agility means that you must be nimble enough to make the changes that you need. And that's why the topic of change, Helm, the HR at the helm when we're dealing with situations of change is critical because that requires agility. It requires to change the way in which we look at our business processes. It requires to change the way in which we train our people. It requires the way in which we measure the productivity of our people. And of course, that leads to adaptability. That once you're aware and you're agile enough to deal with the change that comes with what you've discovered needs to be changed, then you become adaptable. Now, I call those the 3 A's, right? Awareness, agility, adaptability. They work together. It is not enough for you to focus on one and ignore the others because however aware you are and you don't know anything about it, through agility, it's not possible that you're going to be adaptable. But you can't adapt if you don't know what it is that you need to change about your business processes, about your people, etc. So that's why those 3 A's are critical and they create a loop of some kind which feeds on each other. But you will notice that those 3 A's that are spoken about traditionally depend on human competency or capability. But increasingly in the world that we are today, also on digital capability due to the ongoing technological revolution. So artificial intelligence is a critical part of this puzzle, and it confirms that businesses which find the right balance between human competency and AI-based digitalization will thrive by creating a digitally competent workforce. I really don't think that there's any other way that we can put this as starkly as that. Businesses that will not adapt, businesses that will not be agile enough to adapt to the fact that they need to create a digitally competent workforce will either die or they'll just coast along into oblivion at some point. Now, those that choose to ensure that they adapt to the changing revolution within this space are the ones that will thrive. And there's no doubt about that in my mind. So I was sitting in Ethiopia and we had a meeting in Ethiopia and we're talking about, how do we create a digitally competent workforce, a workforce that can ensure that as a business we grow and thrive into the future. And I scratched my head. I didn't sleep for half that night because I was trying to figure out how these things work. There's a gentleman that made a presentation to us. His name is John Kamara. And he was very good at the way that he put some of these things. We had a discussion for about an hour after that. And then I went and on the basis of that, over a day and a half, created a model that I call the TO model of workforce augmentation. And I'm just going to take you through that. But it acts as an operating model for businesses to use as they apply the 3 A's that I've mentioned above. So there we are. It says a competent workforce for the future and a strategic framework for workforce development that is based on that. So first, you can see that we have human competency as the point at which we start. For you to be able to have workforce-based output of any kind, you need competent human beings. I don't think that anybody is going to argue with that. But what is it about having competent human beings? When you have competent human beings, they create knowledge. And it doesn't matter whether it's in an industrial setting or a knowledge-based setting. At the end of the day, there's knowledge that is created in the work-based outputs of competent human beings. And then, this applies to, once the knowledge is created, it has to be applied, which is what we call knowledge or skills application. That comes out as productivity. And what you're trying to do is optimize the productivity that you get from your workforce-based output. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. But what I want to point out here is that in this triangle that you see, the main or the center of it, the core of it, is essentially highlighting the fact that when you're building human competence and knowledge and applying the knowledge and skills that human competency delivers and building and optimizing productivity and documenting that knowledge and transferring it through learning back into your competency framework, which allows you to ensure that you keep that loop dynamic. In today's world, it is important for us to, as much as we can, create that human AI interaction and make sure that as we go through that loop, we are relying and focusing on digital capability to ease this process, to facilitate this process, to make things easier, to optimize productivity, etc., etc. So let's start with human competency and knowledge creation. This is a base for workforce augmentation because work outputs depend on the levels of competency within a workforce. Of course, human competency has got to be supported by a well-defined competency framework, which I think we all know. The competency framework encapsulates knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which are required for each job family that you have or job discipline, which are the sub-units under a job family, and career levels. Career levels will typically be linked to grade levels of some kind, but maybe in a broader manner. So in today's business environment, digital knowledge or digital skills or digital fluency, if you want to call it that, and digital attitude, because you must approach digitalization with an open attitude. And if you don't have that digital attitude, then the awareness that you're trying to build will not happen. The learning that you're trying to build will not happen. So all of them are just as important as the other. Digital knowledge, digital skills, which is how you apply the knowledge, and of course, the attitude that you bring to that process are all as important as each other. And it's important that they're part of the competency framework that we need to fulfill the requirements for human AI symbiosis, which results typically, if you do it well, into innovation, generation of new ideas, and product and productivity optimization. Critical to how this network is give me a second. So critical to how this network should be used, this competency framework should be used as a tool for assessing knowledge, skills, attitude gaps required for different job families, job disciplines, and career levels to enhance knowledge creation. So you see, once you have a competency framework, you know what are the required competency levels for each of the different levels, career levels that you have within the organization, the different job families. You can use that competency framework to assess where the gaps are for your workforce. What is the level of competency you need? What are the current levels of competency Where's the gap? How can you close that gap? 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, I would say, being able to assess that gap in a meaningful way was very difficult. And I'm sure all of you have been involved in some kind of skills gap assessment. How do I tell that the skills that my people need and the skills that they have are the ones that are in place? How do I assess that gap? It was a difficult, amorphous process. Today, because of AI enablement, it is much easier to do that. And there are systems that have been built which can allow you to assess what that gap is, which essentially makes it critical for you to understand how to fill those gaps. The second point on here is that of knowledge, skills, application, and productivity optimization. Remember, we've spoken about human competency and how it is used to create knowledge. Once you create that knowledge, you need to apply the knowledge. Otherwise, it becomes useless knowledge, maybe overtly academic. But it's important for us in our businesses to apply the knowledge that has been created. So human competency, when combined with AI capability, results into applied knowledge and skills which produce work-related outputs. When human competency and AI capability is applied in the right way, not the word, you have to find that right balance between human competency and AI capability. It should result in productivity optimization of the workforce. And there are different measures that you could use for that. Productivity, how much time, for example, is spared. If somebody was running a repetitive task and they had to spend 30 minutes and you use AI enablement to reduce the time that they have to do that task, it means that they have extra time that they can use to do more strategic activities, whether it is thinking of new ideas, strategic planning, strategic execution, collaboration, etc., etc. So AI systems are particularly useful for productivity optimization through supplementing and complementing human intervention. Now, if we go to knowledge documentation, which is the third part of the loop, knowledge documentation essentially means that work-related outputs result into knowledge which should be documented. Why? Because if you don't document what you've done, the skills that, if you don't document what the skills that you've applied have produced, it is very easy that this knowledge will get lost. The skills and the knowledge that have been created will get lost. So documentation is important. It's even more important because once you document, then you can transfer that knowledge to others, because transfer of knowledge means that you have you give people access to what it is that has been documented, and other people take learnings from it. So knowledge documentation requires structured knowledge management systems, which in today's world should be AI enabled to facilitate access and learning. You imagine how powerful generative AI is in making sure that knowledge that has been built across the organization is gathered together, gathered into sets and categories, and then allows people to access that knowledge in ways that makes it easy for them to learn. So learning offerings, when structured pedagogically, is the absorption of new ways of working by the workforce to result into what we know as learning organizations. And one of the theories that we know is that organizations that thrive in today's business environment have to structure themselves as learning organizations, because what you apply today and the environment in which you work today is going to need a different approach tomorrow or the year after, because of all the things that we've spoken about. The environment is volatile, the business environment is volatile. So what you do today is not going to be the same approach that you'll use tomorrow. Learning organizations recognize that and make it easy for themselves to ensure that they're able to learn quickly, apply that learning to their workforce as quickly as possible, and that they're able to transfer that learning to others who may not have been part of the loop as part of ensuring that they are learning organizations. So learning organizations create feedback loops into their competency frameworks to ensure that the levels of knowledge of the workforce are adaptable to an ever-shifting business environment. So, as I come to the end, what have I been saying? That businesses that thrive into the future, right, will do the following. Understand how to leverage their competence, the competence of their workforce, by augmenting it with digital capability, digital capacity. 2, they will enhance the level of knowledge creation within their workforce through facilitating innovation, idea generation, which is based on human-AI symbiosis. 3, they will create work environments that ease the application of learned knowledge and skills by the workforce, which in turn helps to optimize productivity. 4, they build systems that allow for the experience of knowledge and skills application to be documented and then transferred as learning offerings to others as and when required. 5, create a feedback loop for this learning to continuously refresh their organizational competency frameworks. So as HR leaders, first and foremost, as business leaders, because as HR leaders, we're also business leaders. We support our organizations, we support our leaders, we support our workforce in all the things that we do. It is important that we learn and recognize the importance of being aware of the environment in which we operate and how dynamic it is from a technological perspective. We need to be agile. Agile in the sense that how do we deal with the change that comes with all the shifts that we see in the business environment? And that is why it's important for us to understand how to handle change. How do we deal with change? What kind of change management frameworks do we put in place to ease that process of creating agility within the environment? And finally, adaptability. Adaptability. If we don't adapt, we are doomed. And it is our duty as HR leaders, first and foremost, as business leaders, to lead the charge for that change. What I've realized is that if we think that this is a role that we leave to the IT people, you saw the ecosystem that I showed you. The IT guys are focused on hardware and software. If you have people who are in digital business or whatever, they're focused on deploying products onto the market. The only people who are able to put all the dots together and say, if I'm going to create a digitally competent workforce that will deploy digital products into the market as required and use that as a learning loop to fit the ever-changing business, HR leaders are the ones who have to lead that charge. And so I'm urging you that let's create that awareness amongst ourselves, be agile enough and adapt so that our businesses do not fall by the wayside. Thank you all very much. I'll leave that up to questions.
Thank you, Theo, for that wonderful presentation, very crisp. And I have noted that you have told us that we should be agile, we should be self-aware, we should adapt. And I know that the word agile is borrowed from software engineering, but also we have roadblocks towards being agile. In your research and experience, what makes or what promotes agility within the organization, given that we also have the issue of resistance to change? For example, if you did research, you will discover that it's only less than 1% of the people who are benefiting from the usage of technologies like this. What really promotes agility, for example, in this instance, HR leaders?
Yes. So I would want to throw the question back to the audience as well, because we have many experienced HR leaders on the call. However, from my own experience, agility, first and foremost, is a mindset. And that's why earlier on I spoke about the importance of the attitude that you bring. The attitude that you bring to the table. It's not enough for you to have the knowledge. You may have a PhD in HR. I don't have one. But you may have one. You may have the skills. You may have done a job evaluation exercise. You may have done other things that relate to your job and applied the knowledge that you know and learned. However, if the attitude that you bring to the table is one that means that you come with a closed mind, or two, a mind that does not recognize that collaboration is important, very important in the environment in which we live today. Three, an attitude that does not recognize that change is constant. Change is the only constant in the environment, and therefore, how do you prepare yourself to deal with that change as it comes? Four, that all those, that whole journey to agility has got many challenges and obstacles and roadblocks of all kinds. And so you ask yourself, how do you ensure that you create the right allies within the environment, whether it's within your organization, whether it's within the industry, whether it's within across industries, that would help you to build up continuous loops of learning that can ensure that you transfer that knowledge to the people that you work with, that you can influence the change that is required. I believe that, in my view, it all goes back to attitude.
Thank you very much for that response. And I'm remembering that you mentioned the concept of knowledge management. And I think very few organizations embrace the concept of knowledge management. Why do you think this? And it's very important for you to thrive when you manage, especially knowledge within the organization. Why do you think organizations are not embracing the concept of knowledge management so that they can be able to thrive in a very changing environment?
Right. Again, I'll rely on my experience of in the places that I've worked. Let me first make an analogy. I work for KPMG. In KPMG, I worked in financial advisory, and we're doing bank IPOs. We did the first bank IPO in Uganda with Bank of Baroda, etc., etc. And we did many other assignments. Even though I have an MBA in finance, however, that knowledge was not enough to allow me to apply it the way that our clients expected the knowledge to be applied. I needed to have certain skills. How do you build skills? By experience. You must get your hands dirty. You must have done an IPO, or you have to rely on somebody who has done an IPO in order to be able to ensure that you do it well. What did KPMG do? KPMG created a portal. Remember that this was before AI days, because I'm a fairly old man. Now, they created a portal, which they called a knowledge portal, which meant that when you prepared an RFP, so a request for proposal, and you responded to a client request for proposal, and you won that proposal, even if you didn't, you would have to put it on that portal. If you had an assignment that you did and you prepared a report, that report would go to that portal. What would that mean? That when I am going to work on an IPO, such as I did, and I needed to pick up information on which other IPOs have been done by KPMG people across the world, how did they do them? Which team was on that? Who in that team can I reach out to speak to, etc., etc. It was on the portal. So I would go and search and find those documents, look at them, read them, understand what those teams went through, learn from them, and reach out to them if I needed to ask questions. Without making it too complicated, that's what knowledge management should look like. Now, when KPMG did this 20 years ago, it was a lot more difficult because the technology wasn't as advanced as we have it today. It is so much easier today for us to do that. And if you have people that work for banks here, or if you have people that work for Let me use banking as an example. We have a transaction that we do today. That transaction means that we prepare credit memos, we prepare term sheets, we prepare all that stuff that comes when you're doing a transaction. Transaction A, it has to be done in a specific way, right? Now, when you're done, you disperse, everybody is happy, maybe some people even get some bonus. 2 years later, you have another transaction that needs to be done, which is very similar to the one that has been done, right? If the people that did the transaction 2 years ago have moved on, they've got other jobs, maybe they've moved out of the country and gone somewhere else, because they kept the credit memo and the term sheet on their computers, you don't have access to that knowledge. So what happens? You have to sit down and start thinking afresh. Why do we need to try and reinvent the wheel when in reality somebody has done it before? That's the power of knowledge management. But I think many organizations don't understand it that way. They think that knowledge management systems or structures means you must have a well-stocked library with hard copy books, which people can access when they want to. Far from it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the knowledge that you create from your own resources and making that knowledge accessible to people easily, in a manner that they can, use that knowledge to, optimize productivity, and also be able to train others that may not necessarily have been part of that process.
Thank you, Stephen. I can see Rose Sang, you raise up your hand. You want to ask a question. Jacinta, you can unmute her. I think she has a comment or a question. As we wait for Rose Sang to come online, who should spearhead this process of knowledge management?
Yes. Now, good question. If you leave it with because again, most of our organizations tend to leave that process with the librarians, right? Because you have a librarian, you task them with the issue of saying, please create our knowledge management system, etc., etc. Librarians will tend to create knowledge management systems that are built on the books you have, the journals that you have published, etc., etc. While what we're looking for here is knowledge that has been created within the organization. Now, who should know the bulk of knowledge that has been created within an organization? It should be the business leaders. It should be the line managers, right? Now, remember, we also said, or we also agree, I hope everybody agrees with me, that line managers are the first line HR managers that you have in a business. And when you deploy an HR business partnering model, then HR should work with the line managers to ensure that that process of knowledge creation is generated right from the point at which the knowledge is created, applied, and deployed. And then you engender a system where that knowledge can be documented and then transferred. So again, you can see where I'm going to. I'm saying, as HR leaders, we have a duty to take charge of these processes, because most of the other people will not look at them in the same broad way that we as HR people look at it. The librarian will look at it from the point of view of books. And I'm not necessarily saying, I'm not trying to put down librarians. Please, if there are any librarians on the call, that's not what I'm trying to do. But, that's the way I think it should work.
I agree with you. There are scholars who say that HR should assist line managers to become some sort of HR people. That is when they can be able to have those concepts of HR that promote knowledge creation. And it is at the source, at the section or at the department where the knowledge is created.
Yes.
But the sectional heads should have the mindset of HR. And of course, this is where the issue of training HR issues on an HR. Yes, Rose Sang, how are you?
Yeah. Is this the Rose Sang that I know?
Rose Sang, you are unmuted now. Unless you're, I think she has left. I don't know. Her hand was up. I don't know. It was my
I think
mistake.
she has left.
Oh, okay. I work with
Yeah,
a Rose
me
Sang
too,
in
but she has
KPMG,
left.
so I don't know whether that's the same person.
It must be her. It must be her. You can send your questions. You can be sending your questions so that we can read them. In the meantime, any books that you can recommend that can easily bring out the thought processes that you have given to us, and books that you can recommend.
Right. I wish I'd thought of that. I would have. I can't remember the titles. I can't remember the authors either. But what I can do is that I'll send a list to you guys so that you can share it with the people that have come here. But obviously, because of my interest, and let me be honest, this interest, like I've said, has developed over the last 1 month. This is how it went. Previously, I was trying to read, short texts on AI and on digitalization and on that sort of stuff. But I wasn't quite putting it together. It is only in the last 4 to 5 weeks that I started putting all of this together. And that's why it resulted into that TO model on workforce augmentation, because of all the thoughts that were running in my mind over the last 5 to 6 weeks, I would say. And so much of the reading, or the deeper reading that I've done on this subject has been as recently as you can imagine.
Yes, Rose Sang, you can talk to Stephen. He appears to remember you. You can,
Thank you. How are you?
So it's you,
been
Rose?
many years.
Yes, indeed. How's it going?
I know you're saying you're old, but yeah, when I think about it, well, from the days of KPMG in the early 2000s.
Indeed.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yes.
It's great to see you after many years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. I
You're
wanted
welcome.
to improve on your model a little bit.
Yes.
The TIO model.
Thank you.
Maybe we could, if you wanted to just go to it so that then we can speak to it. Well,
okay. Let me do that. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
So the model is I mean, it's quite good. But I think there's opportunity to improve in a couple of ways. One is, if you look at the role of HR, the role of HR is to help businesses win in the markets that they serve. And so I think the model could benefit from, rather than at the very top, it probably should culminate in what it is that the business seeks to achieve. So whether it's productivity, it's innovation, it's business growth, it's because that's what the model is seeking to do.
Yeah.
The second piece as well would be, I can see in the middle, you've put there the issue around digital capability. But I think we could elevate it a bit more so that then you are replacing it with human plus AI augmentation platform, because it's not about automation.
Yes.
The human and AI augmentation, includes AI copilots, AI agents, intelligent automation, blockchain, that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and then the last bit, as you talk about the competency, I think it moves beyond competency as we know it, but rather it's about how do we then build human capability in terms of leadership, creativity in this new world? How do we build AI capability so that then people can effectively work with these intelligent systems? How do we then, if we build the individual capabilities, how does that then translate to organizational capability? So that then the sum of all the parts, sort of come together.
Yes.
And lastly, then how do we build the learning capability, which you've spoken to? But I think it's about the business of learning and learning, relearning, because the way AI works is that it learns from what we do and then enhances that. So I think we could elevate. It's a good model, but I think there's opportunity then to elevate it to get it to 5.0, so that then it aligns to the reality of the AI world.
Okay.
Yeah, but well done. I think it was a good presentation.
Thank you, Rose. Thanks very much. Points well taken. I totally agree that that in terms of the knowledge creation and how it leads into final outcomes, because you apply knowledge only because you wanted to achieve a certain outcome, which is represented by productivity optimization. But yes, I'll try to figure out a way of showing what kind of outcomes you'd expect to see when you apply this model. Then on human AI interaction, yes, this is actually very basic. I have not changed that since I didn't sleep for half that night trying to but to conceptualize it. But based on the reading that I've done over the last 2 weeks, I would say, if I had time, I would have written that differently, because then there are four levels of AI. There's, some parts of AI which are still theoretical, etc. But, definitely I'm going to make improvements to how that looks like. Then in terms of competency, yes, clearly individual and organizational capability is an important part of how we bring that out. So if I look at the competency framework that we use at Afreximbank, it's broad enough to capture what kind of competencies you expect at a certain level or a certain job family, and even at a certain within a certain type of organization, because we operate a group, we have insurance, we have etc. And so we try to develop a competency framework that would sort of respond to all those at that point. So I believe that part of this is how you can expand what is shown here to explain it in better form. And actually what I intend to do actually is to develop this into an article, maybe a book even. So once I do that, then a lot of these will come out a lot better than they have right now. But points well taken, and I appreciate your input into that. You've spoken like a true KPMG person.
All right. That is very well done. We appreciate what you have been able to generate for us. We have learned. But lastly, before you give your parting shots, what is a learning organization? Some people may not probably be able to know what is a learning organization.
Right. Let me use characteristics to respond to that. And the first characteristic I would use for a learning organization is one that accepts that when mistakes are made, or errors are made, it does not become a parade of punishment, right? Because if you rely on a parade of punishment for every mistake or error that is made, then people will hold back, either will not want to generate new ideas or apply new ideas because they fear that if those ideas flop, then they'll be punished. Or if they do apply new ideas to the workplace and they don't work as they should, they will hide. So there's nothing worse than an organization where there's a fear for innovation and a fear for ideation and a fear for, doing things. So that's the first thing. Allow people to make mistakes. Of course, you must be cautious enough to ensure that mistakes do not drown the organization. But, then secondly, create channels for feedback. How do people communicate? How do people collaborate? We do have many organizations that operate in silos, and therefore, what happens is that what is happening in one silo is not necessarily linked or learning from what's happening in another silo to the extent that it should if you want to have an organization that is running harmoniously. So how do we, the characteristic is that you will have siloed mentality. People don't learn as much from each other. And in those cases, people actually hide information from each other because maybe they think that if I give this information or share this information with somebody else, they will benefit from it more than I will, et cetera, et cetera. So collaboration and creating open feedback loops is important. The other is, I don't know, let me see whether attitude is something that is important in learning organizations, because it all goes back to attitude. You must have an open mind. But to some extent, it's probably linked to what I said already, that for organizations to allow people to learn, the fear of failing must not be part of it. But there must also be, maybe let's call it psychological safety. There must be levels of psychological safety that allow people to speak up, allow people to disagree when they need to disagree, and allow people to agree with each other when they need to. I know many organizations that create a fear for speaking up. In many cases in African organizations, it's because of the power distance that we create between the workforce and its leaders. The CEO has their own lift. You can only speak to the CEO when he speaks to you. You cannot send them an email. These are just examples of psychological safety. But you can't have an environment where an organization is a learning organization when people fear to speak to each other, right? I don't know what else I could say, but off my mind, those are some of the characteristics that I would probably look at when we talk about learning organization. I'm sure people have many other that they have, and I would encourage them to write them out in the chat so that we can have that knowledge shared. Since we're talking about knowledge sharing and knowledge documentation, let's share all the knowledge that we have in this group.
Thank you. And Steve, the point that you have mentioned, collaboration, feedback, creating psychological safety are some of the markers of high-performance organizations.
Indeed.
You asked me. Your parting shot, what is it that you do not want your participants not to forget?
I don't want the listeners, participants, whatever it is, to forget that it all starts with how much awareness, how much self-awareness we have within ourselves about our state of knowledge and our state of being. And let me use an example of myself. 3 months ago, I did not know how ignorant I was on this subject of, AI, etc., etc. I've spent a lot of time trying to teach myself, trying to learn many of these things, and I'm still at the basic level. But I've made a vow to myself that I'm going to make it a centerpiece of the learning that I'm going to do over the next 6 to 12 months, to as much, to as large an extent as I can possibly make it. But you see, when you don't know that you don't know, this is the worst state of being that anybody can be in. So it's important that in our day-to-day lives, let's create those situations that make us aware that we don't know, because that's the only way that we go out and learn and improve ourselves and build our capacities in the different ways. So when you don't know that you don't know, it is the worst state of being that anybody can ever be in. Let's be aware as much as we can.
Thank you very much. When we come to see the pyramids, there we know that we know somebody there who will welcome us. Thank you so much for having carved time to come and talk to us about these very important concepts that will help our organizations become better, and also for us to become better. I can see my good friend Paul Mbata has shared the link for us to continue this discussion. I can see Rachel has said, thank you very much, Theo.
Yes, that's my friend as well.
Okay. It's good to have friends who come and give you some fuel. Indeed. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wonderful time. Meet you on Tuesday for another amazing discovery of another topic as we continue to demystify business concepts and professional concepts that will make us optimize our performance. If I should be able to pick one of the concepts that Steve mentioned. Thank you so much. Good night. Enjoy your supper for those who have not had. Asante sana, Steve. Lala salama. Thank you, Liz. Noah Koech. Thank you so much. Good night.